Hi, loving friends. This is Chris Parr from Miraculite Healing. There's nowhere else I would rather be than to connect to all you beautiful beings of love. You know what? I have a great video for you today. In today's video, we will be discussing what is teen shame. So why is adolescent shame so difficult? What is so unique at those adolescent years? Why are those years more than the preverbal shame, child shame, or adult-onset shame? Why are those years so distinct and unique? Then we need to know what shame does during those years that is different than previous or subsequent times. The uniqueness of adolescent shame at the time. The profundity, deep insight, and great depth of knowledge or thought of the shame itself at adolescent years. So recognize and acknowledge the difficulty of your shame. To recognize and acknowledge it's self-perpetuating and just too shameful to face. To recognize and acknowledge not just what you think, but the way you think. To recognize and acknowledge you tended to ignore the most significant area of shame of all. Whether it was infancy, child, or adolescent, or the intensity was just too frightening, just yet with that gut-tightening feeling to recognize and acknowledge any of those examples, or your reasons, or your own reasons, independent of those reasons of why shame is genetically intricate and interwoven so tightly together and too complex for you. To recognize and acknowledge what was unique in your adolescent years. The loneliness, the withdrawal, the hiding, the avoiding, the wanting to run from everything, the feeling of being flawed and defected and not good enough, stupid, the pressure, scared, or how you withdrew from school pressures to drugs and to porn to find freedom. How you cheated your way through, only focused on escape, not on growth. Some of you, as we say, you did not have too much panic of growing up, but high school was a nightmare. It was a nightmare trauma at either way of the spectrum. Some of your high school, maybe it was the trauma of mom, or no dad, or a drunken good-for-nothing idiot beating stepfather that affected you because you were just in your teens. Maybe some of you were late bloomers, 18, 19. Maybe you carried on into the 20s. Maybe the trauma of high school did not hit you until you went to college, when you thought it would be easier, but at college more was expected of you. And all maybe you knew how to do was run to drugs, cocaine, like I did, to deal with the pain. You need to define for yourself which combination has twisted and distorted you and is unique to you, a unique setting for you. Maybe it was the trauma of school or high school or the war of trauma within. Maybe it was the panic. Maybe it was the panic of growing up to get good grades, or the rush of hormones, the shift in biology and psychology, sex, sexuality, and identity that really messed you up. For many of you who have discovered your adult years, your sexuality was different from what the consensus tells you what it ought to be. You knew it then, maybe you would not admit it. Some of you didn't know it then, but many of you did. You knew. You preferred women as a man, or a woman preferred men, or men are supposed to want women, and women are supposed to want men. You may have denied it and played the wrong role and performed, but knew maybe it was the panic around this growing up. Or maybe the wounding itself that was so profound. Or maybe it was just the fact of accumulation of shame finally showed its ugly face with the potency and cause of the power of impact, which made you want to run and shrink and hide when too many problems came up. Maybe shoplifting, sex, drugs were your escape from the panic, the pain, and the ghosts of the past. Maybe it was the absence of a father all through childhood, the beatings, the denial, the heartache of no dad, to only get another asshole stepdad in your teens that went out of control and snapped on you when tension around the house was too much. And how they also resorted to drugs and alcohol to cope with the pain. Maybe you could not talk to stepdads or your mom, so you found refuge in drugs, alcohol, and sex. Maybe the constant fighting with mom over how she fucked you up or how she was stupid for not understanding. Maybe she stood up in court and told the judge, "I don't know what to do with my boy," and you felt abandoned, rejected, belittled, ignored, and snap, and you're broke. Happened to me. The rebelling to show mom she was stupid for all her asshole stepdads, to show her how much of a fuck up I am because of how she allows them all to beat me. Maybe it was the constant grounding for bad so-called behavior when all you wanted was a listening ear, but none were to be found. Only drugs, sex, and alcohol. Maybe the rebelling or the shoplifting for attention with so-called friends, or the lack of money at home, to feel like you can have nice things too. Maybe to break and enter houses for nice things to feel not poor. You need to define for yourself which combination has twisted and distorted you and is unique to you, a unique setting for you. To recognize and acknowledge what happened in your shame, in the midst of pain. I searched for help, but I got a slap on the wrist, denial, rejection, grounding. And then you found drugs and running where your only so-called friend, or where you, the one that had a fairly good childhood, and adolescent then came full force, called something else. Really look and break down your own unique combination of teenage shame, impacts and outcomes, and once you define, you love this part of yourself. The adolescent shame, a cumulative becoming more overt or covert at that time, and thought, oh glad mom and dad are not doing that anymore. My brother or sister has gone off to college, no more favoritism. Or my sister has gotten married, more space for me. But now I have a new shame. I'm all alone and I have to deal with it. Is that what it did to you? What did shame do to you at your adolescent identity level? Did you say, I'll never love again? I'll give up? It's too hard? No one cares? Why even bother? Or that I just have to find the perfect mate, soulmate, lover, causing partner? Or you're good enough and nobody else is good enough for me? I'm okay, you're not okay. You need to recognize these things. Why it's difficult? The uniqueness of the time, the profundity, deep insight, great depth of knowledge or thought of the shame itself. The panic of growing up, and if that wasn't enough, at the same time, they put you in high school. The trauma of high school. But Chris, those were the best days of my life. Well, that's pretty sad if that's true. It really was a trauma if those were the best years of your life. Now, there are many factors to the trauma of high school, but some of the most profound ones are popularity and academics. Regardless of what your high school years were like, some of you were wonderful students. You were a teacher's pet, and they loved you, and you were getting good grades, and every college wanted you. You won these awards, and you were president of the club. and you're in good standing, and a wide variety of activities. That sort of thing. However, others of you were at the other end of the spectrum. It really was really traumatic time. Probably not many here watching this, but there are those in the world that were at the very bottom of that rank, where the high school was a hellhole and a nightmare. The hardest time, a waste of time, stupid, didn't teach anything, I was picked on, loner, loser, no friends, beaten up, used drugs to escape, failed tests, no food, beaten up by parents before school. Most of you may not be able to relate to that because maybe you did not have friends around that group. For some, it was the most tragic trauma, but for all, it was a trauma. Now, there are many factors to the trauma of high school, but some of the most profound ones, and the first one, is the trauma of popularity. Everybody is the big issue. You got to belong in high school to something or somebody. You got to belong, and every high school knows who are the smart kids and who are the eggheads. The smart kids, but the cool ones. The smart kids and the nerds. The smart kids and the geeks. The alright kids, the nerd kids, and the geeks, and the progressives, the retards, the ones that don't fit in groups, get picked on. The thrasher groups, rap groups, transgender groups, lesbian and gay groups, drug groups, totally out of it, weed, pot smoking groups, party groups, musical groups, sport groups, the sexual ones, junior delinquent ones, the ones who will end up in jail, etc. There are so many kinds of groups in high school. Every group, and you try to belong. I have to belong, and I got to belong. Even those who pride themselves on being a loner, I don't belong, I'm a loner. Well, I'm a loner too. No, we won't get together after school because we won't be loners, but we can still belong to that group of loners and don't give a damn about anything. And we belong at a distance, but we still belong. No membership, no senior sponsorship, no teaching overlooking, but nonetheless, we have our group. We're the loners who don't belong. Skip school every day, can't fit in, can't find our place, lost, confused, nervous, scared, hopeless, helpless. There's a bunch of them out there. And I got to belong. Popularity is very critical. Academics, even if you're getting good grades, the pressure. You see, when you're in elementary school, particularly, many of you coming up in that sensing, many of their 20s and 30s, you went to progressive schools where they did not grade you. You passed, or you didn't pass. You had problems that needed to be dealt with. Then, all of a sudden, you're thrown into high school. You're an 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grader, and you have grades A and B or C and D, and you have a grade average. Teachers talk about grades more in high school. You got an A, you're over there. You failed, or you are not doing that well, and teachers think nothing of it, announcing that not all of them, but many of them, to announce you did poorly to everyone, and force you to do better. That humiliation will do you good, they say. They now know better, but nonetheless, many grew up that they didn't know better. Academics, you see, for most of you, got decent to good grades. You can't really imagine what's it like to be someone who failed at everything. Perhaps how to relate it is you have a job now that it would be like if every morning, as soon as you got to your job, you were criticized, told what a fool you were, what a stupid person you are, how you will never amount to anything. You will never be good at your job. You're going to get fired by 10 o'clock. You have been told this 12 times. By noon, you have been given dirty looks, laughed, whispered about. You have been criticized. You have been put down. What would you do? You would quit. But you can't quit high school, not till you're 16. For some kids, that is what high school was, a constant pounding into the pavement. And they would study, some of those kids. They didn't study. Yes, some of them would study all night long. And they just didn't have what it took to fit into that system. Trauma of academics, if you did well or not, was a trauma. Another thing that shame does in these adolescent years, different than any other time in your life, everything, either the wonderful things or terrible things, become life consequences, or much more in high school than when you're in elementary school. You see, everything becomes a life consequence. There is the whole identity crisis of being a teenager, of not knowing who you are, not being able to talk to anyone about it. You had no one to really talk to about all the issues or crisis or identity, life, demands, changes, what's really going on with your life. And you don't know who you really are. When you were a teenager, how much did you really talk? Not performing, but an actual real in-depth talking. Teenagers, as much noise as they make, they talk less than any other age group. But they are on the phone all the time. That's performing. Little kids talk, infants talk. They start and you can't shut them up. Teenagers, think about it, teenagers. Come on. When you were a teenager, or if you have teenagers, how was school today? Oh, it's fine. Oh, it was cool, neat and groovy. Okay. They don't talk, not to you. They perform for each other. And they don't talk to you. Maybe you will talk to your friends then. No. Teenagers perform for their friends. They don't talk to them. Think about it. You performed for your best, most intimate friend. You performed for them. You could not talk to them about who I am, or I'm having an identity crisis, and not expect that to be spread all over the school, okay? And again, used against you by them or someone or somebody else. You cannot sit down with your best friend and unload all the stuff, because what if over the summer they make a new friend or something happens between you two and everything goes wrong? Now they hate you, and now they spill the secrets all over. You do not talk to teenager friends, you perform for them. Maybe when you were a teenager, you were the vocal ones, talked about the stuff of the day. I saw so-and-so and they were wearing this. Can you believe what they said about so-and-so? Did you see who they were going out with? Did you hear the rumors? How do you feel about all that? Cool, okay, neat, hip, awesome, groovy, far out, fine? Depending on your age, you didn't talk, and that's the time you need to talk the most. And that's the time you need to be talking all the time, because you don't know who you are and have no way of finding out who you are. Who do you talk to about identity crisis in high school? Well, you can't talk to your parents about what's going on in your life, that's for sure. Now the shame from childhood and the panic of growing up, of being a teenager, is causing an identity crisis. Maybe you can talk to your teachers. If not your teachers, then your high school counselor. Come on. Maybe they were the one or two high school counselors in the country who were wonderful. But you know what? Those high school counselors talk about? You want to take that job? Fine. Finish those courses? Fine. And go to college? Fine, I will. You are not going to talk to them about, I don't know who I am. I have shame. I'm going through an identity crisis right now. What, to have it spread all over the school, to every teacher or your friends? Seeing you go into the counselor's office? Why do you keep going to the counselor's office? Oh, discussing classes, college, etc. Also, you see, everything becomes a life consequence. If you get a good grade, you're going to go on to greatness. If you get bad grades, you will probably struggle in life. Now, there are many factors to the trauma of high school, but one of the most profound ones are the pressure of life consequences. When you are 6 or 7 or 8 and 10 years old and you get in trouble, throw a spitball, steal someone's ball, push someone down, or throw mud in someone's face, it's considered an adjustment problem. But when you are 16, 17, 18, and you push someone down, you are a delinquent person, showing or characterized by a tendency to commit a crime, particularly minor crime. Others say to you and label you no good, and you will end up in jail. When you screw up, don't do it, mess it up, do it wrong in 4th grade, shame on you. Better do better. You don't want your mommy and daddy to be upset, do you? When you don't do your homework when you are 16 or 17, you're a total disgrace, a total failure, disrespecting, procrastinator, not going anywhere in your life. You'll never amount to anything. You will end up as a garbage man or in the back of some factory worker for the rest of your life, if you're lucky. You see, everything becomes life consequence. If you get a good grade, you're going to go on to greatness. If you made a touchdown in the last football game, you're going to get a scholarship to your favorite university and become a great pro and make millions of dollars and be on the NFL. Everything, whether the wonderful things or the terrible things, become life consequences. It is much more profound in high school than when you were in elementary school. You got all A's in 6th grade, big deal. Oh, you got all A's in high school, you're brilliant. You're going to get an academic scholarship and make your family proud. And we don't have to pay for your college. Everything is a life consequence on the top end and the bottom end of high school. When I was in elementary, I was held back in grade 2. My teachers and parents organized a special program for me to learn. Extra reading classes, read in front of the class, extra spelling and math tutors, etc. But when I was in high school, I was very ashamed of my low grades and what others thought and felt, especially when I told them I skipped school all the time. My grades were low, and I dropped out in grade 10. And after a while, I homeschooled myself, and then failed grade 10, and then I had to go to summer school to catch up. Others, including friends, family, teachers, and others, say, you better get your act together. What? Are you not almost 19 and have not graduated yet? You're too close to the end of high school to play around. You will end up like them, working a physical labor job and hurt yourself, using drugs, and you will fail. If you don't get down and study, you will be on welfare and go nowhere. The shame around this from others and yourself cripples you. I reached a point with teen shame that I am a failure. I am not going to amount to anything. I will be a pub cook, washing dishes my whole life. And I did. I'll be just like my dad, a loser. I'll end up on welfare. I knew I could not do it. I knew I should not have tried. Then I looked for the easy, quick fix, just to get by. The deep wounding of the soul happens during the adolescence years, with all the stresses, the panics, the pain, the demands of being a teenager and growing up. For some of us, we tend to sugarcoat the facts by saying high school years were the greatest of years. Oh, I wish I was a teenager again. You get shut down as a teenager. Shame was the wounding, but separate from that. You get shut down and you crashed and burned. And this is what makes these years so incredibly impactful. Most of the bad stuff of teenage years is ignored because most adults want to forget their teenage years. They want to forget the panic. They want to forget the trauma. They want to forget the pain. They want to forget the demands. They want to forget the wounding. They want to forget the potent energy around teenage years. However, they do want to remember that game we did, how our team won the tournament. Remember that time of the slumber party. Remember the graduation party. Remember the skipping class and smoking weed all day. Remember our new car, driving the car in the summer and our summer nights, swimming in the ocean and the phosphorescence and camping. Oh, teenagers, yes, was the best. I only want to remember only the fun times. What they are doing is sugarcoating the facts by saying high school years were the greatest of years. The phrase, those adolescent years, I wish I was a kid again. All this goes on and you forget. Any of you who have teenagers right now that are going through it now, and you will roll your eyes and wonder, why they can't act like you. They're probably acting just like you were when you were that age too. I never did that behavior. Sure you did. You just forgot. Different form, different context, but the same stuff. But you forgot. When you hit puberty, then all of a sudden when you hit puberty, whether you wanted to or not, you knew smack, I'm growing up. Every teenager, regardless of how wonderful or horrible the home was, every teenager goes through the panic of growing up and the uncertainty, or rather the instability of chaos of growing up. Now, to compound this potent, impactful shame from childhood, teenagers have to deal with the panic of growing up. Some may say, I could hardly wait to grow up, Chris. Since I was a child, I could hardly wait to grow up, drive, get out of the house, and be on my own. Oh, what the freedom. When I was 11 to 12, preteen age, I used to stay up late grinding my teeth, waiting to grow up, to move out on my own, to get out of this hellhole that's called home. Age 13 to 14 was never good enough, but 13, oh boy, I'm almost there. Now 16, even closer. I can get out of here. Never have to go to that bed early. I can eat whatever I want, stay up late and drink and get drunk. I can drive, go see who I want, have over who I want. We can have sleepovers all the time, but by the time you're 18, you don't care. Nonetheless, you can hardly wait to get out of the house when you're growing up. Others of you never wanted to grow up. You wanted to be a kid forever. Sit on mommy's lap, kiss, cuddle, or stay very close to daddy and stay a baby or a child forever, playing, drawing, running, hide, and seek. Oftentimes we get jealous of other younger siblings. We wanted to stay young forever, as a Peter Pan to fly off to Never Never Land, where you don't have to grow up. Or the biggest problem is a tick-tocking alligator in Captain Hook. That's it. Life will just be wonderful fairy tale. Then comes puberty, smack, and all of a sudden, hair on your face, underarms, chest, belly, private area is growing. You're developing breasts, and you start to have that thing called the time of the month, or moon time. Your menstruation, names attached to it, my friends, society, other males, and even your mothers. Then all of a sudden, whether you wanted to or not, you knew smack, Dad, I'm growing up, and whether it called your bluff or threatened your fantasy, it was a panic. We don't care if you were eager to grow up and get out of the home at age 14, or whether at 16 still pretending you were 6. There is the panic of growing up that impacted each of you. There is chaos. Every teenager, regardless of how wonderful or horrible the home was, every teenager goes through the panic of growing up and the uncertainty, or rather instability, of chaos is handled with the absolute beliefs and attitudes. Teenagers at a constant state of instability and chaos and create stability with absolute. Listen to teenagers. Everything is black and white. There are no grays. There are no alternatives. There is no consideration. Everything is good or bad or right or wrong. Mine, yours, everything is black and white and nothing is in between. And they do this not because they are stupid, not because they are teenagers, but because they are trying to respond to the instability. Everything is up in the air. If they can have some foundation of absolute belief, all men are, and all boys are, all girls are, women are, all parents are, all Canadians are, all Democratic are, all liberals are, etc. There is never variance of gray, absolute belief and attitude. And they do that in order to create stability and to bring an end to the chaos. The uncertainty and the chaos have made certain with judgments. Probably the most judgmental people are absolute. And they have no sense around those judgments. They are bad. They should die. They good. They should live. This is my best of the best friend. Most intelligent. Most wonderful. Most fantastic. Then until the next day, and my best friend is the most terrible. Most disgusting. Most stupid. Never going to amount to anything. These absolute judgments about everything, the teenagers handle the chaos and discomfort and make it comfortable with life decisions. You and many of you made these decisions. You forgot, but you made them. Teenagers create absolutes to create comfort or stability and a certainty in a totality chaotic world. Some of you, as infants, had a level of shame that did chemical alterations to your brain. When teenagers have shame, they make the absolute, the life choice. It doesn't matter what I do now, I got it set out there. That makes it comfortable. These absolute beliefs, absolute thoughts and feelings, absolute life decisions, I'll never be happy again. I'll never amount to anything. I'll never be your friend again. You know, if you could not go to the school dance Saturday night, you were going to die. If you could not go, you'd move to the next town. I might as well never be happy again. I'll never have friends again. I'll never trust anybody again. I'll never love again. I'll never have anybody love. A matter of fact, I'll never have a boyfriend or girlfriend again. Absolutes to create comfort or stability and certainty in a total chaotic world. Adolescents do this all the time. That's part of the panic of growing up and the pressures around school and life and family. The panic that hits every one of them, regardless of every one of you, regardless of the facts and figures that surround it. Also, part of this panic of growing up comes with this very onslaught of hormones. With this onslaught of hormones, what happens then, you suffer that kind of pain of being abused or being abandoned or being taught in that infant time, when at that time you were wronged. The pain is such that your brain releases endorphins. Endorphins are like morphine. The brain releases endorphins. The problem is at that time your brain is too fragile. Your brain is still too new. Your neural connections, as we will, are still too young. That all of a sudden you overdose with endorphins. It can burn out, in a certain sense, parts of your neural structure. Parts of the nerve endings, it can alter the patterns of chemistry in your brain. Now, you know, if you take morphine, a little bit of it can kill the pain. If you overdose it, it can kill you. You know, anyone who has attempted hallucinating drugs, a little bit can make you high and feel terrific and fantastic, but if you took a whole bunch of it, it could kill you. Well, the same happens naturally in the brain. When you release endorphins, like you do when you laugh or eat chocolate, that you do when you feel happy, when you smile, when you stimulate your thymus, it releases endorphins, and that makes you feel good. But if you overload it, it can make you feel bad. A type of beta-endorphin that is 200 more times powerful than morphine and is found among suicidal patients, not just saying it to have mom's care, but genuine suicidal people have this beta-endorphin that is 200 times more powerful than morphine. Can you imagine the kind of amount of pain they must have been in to have or force their body to release that kind of endorphins? Also, serotonin is triggered by tryptophan. Tryptophan, in the right amounts, assists infants with development. Serotonin assists with anxiety, keeping you calm, cool, and collective when you're under fire, but in that particular sense, it also can reversibly impact the body. And when there is overload serotonin, it can do neuronal damage and nerve-ending damage. Some of you as infants had a level of shame that did chemical alterations to your brain. Tick-tock, the biological clock moves through childhood. Then you come into puberty. Then all of a sudden, the hormones flood the body, and the chemistry floods the body. And this is a lot of reasons why some teenagers are genuinely suicidal. They are not just making up. They are not just being dramatic. Some are, yes, but some are legitimately suicidal because all of a sudden the body is flooded with a beta endorphin. Yes, it is mixed up with their absolute judgments and their absolute of thoughts and feelings and their absolutes of life's decisions. And yes, they are overdramatic and all of that stuff, but some of them under it are genuinely suicidal or emotionally disturbed. The parent may say, they were fine, I don't know what happened to them. They were such a beautiful little baby. They were such an adorable little child. They were such a well-behaved child. Now they have turned into some sort of psychological monster. It may be chemical. It may be shame. Those of you who remembered and look back with a certain embarrassment and a certain sense of your own shame at your adolescent years, how could I have been like that? It, could have been the shame that produced a chemical onslaught along with hormonal onslaught that produced that type of behavior. If you do not heal your shame before first break puberty, your chemistry, brain, total development of body will be a shame-based body and brain. You want to heal your shame and you boost your immune system. During your childhood, the thalamus gland and the hypothalamus gland within the brain, the governors of the brain and the body, the brain within the brain to grow and develop the body. The thalamus gland is in charge of growing the body, not linear, not logically, but instead exponentially. All those out there, and they look at metaphysics, snubs, and because it's not linear and it's not logical, and thank God you're not, if you grew logically, you would be a mess. How do you grow a body logically? Do you start with the bones? Realize the mess? Your bones become grown up. Bones without the muscles or the veins or the skin. All of a sudden you have the skeleton sticking out of the bottom of your foot. Oh, the baby is growing logically. And in fears, the skin and muscles will catch up with the bones. Logically, do we start left foot or right foot? Which side of the body logically? Now, when you were going to grow a face, do you grow an eyeball first? No, that is silly. What about the socket? Lean forward and the eye would fall out. Then there are the veins that have to grow, the arteries that have to grow. It all has to be done together in symphony. That's not logical. That's not linear. That's exponential. The thalamus gland is one that oversees all of that. When you reach your teenage years, what's happening? Well, for the most part, you have your adult stature, yes. You may gain or reduce weight, yes. In several years, if you get osteoporosis, you may shrink. But beyond that, you pretty much have your body structure when you hit those adolescent years. What happens in that sensing, the elegance of the system, the thalamus, doesn't tear. It switches its job to function to not growing the body, but instead protecting the body. It's in charge of the immune system. If this endocrine system is adversely affected by shame, it can alter the growing and development patterns. More and more distinctive, it can alter the health pattern. That's where you notice a bunch of adolescents become sick during those adolescent years. They seem to be healthy as a kid. They were healthy as an ox. They could eat anything and do anything. They ate dirt. They ate worms. They picked up gum on the bottom of the chairs and ate it. But then, you hit those teenage years in the slightest wind and you got a cold. You have the flu. You got this, you got that. It's because they are interacting with someone else sick. No, it's because shame has penetrated the immune system. Because it's a chemical response in the body. That's how invasive shame can be. Some people become sickly in those adolescent years and never really recover from it. Heal your shame and you boost your immune system. Some of you can look back and say, when I was 17, that's when, and never did really heal. And I have always been weak ever since, absolutely. Yes. Since shame is so self-perpetuating, and because it is so painful, for some, the shame produces its own shame. Shame not only impacts what you think and feel, it also impacts, for some of you, the way you think and the way you feel. It does. Shame is one of those topics where others will say, that does not apply to me. I'll just keep going. I can't learn anything about that topic. It wouldn't help at all. Or they came to one shame. They may learn about the preverbal shame of infancy. But when it came to the terrible twos of childhood, or even teen shame, no, that doesn't apply to me. Hear it all the time. Since shame is so self-perpetuating, and because it is so painful for some, the shame produces its own shame, therefore makes for the intricacy and difficulty of perplexing subject. There may be difficulty for some of you hearing this. Therefore, we congratulate you on your courage to come and listen and do the work, even though shame is so very painful to you. For others of you, the reason may deal with the particular uniqueness of the ability or weakness of shame. Shame does impact you emotionally, but you knew that. But it also impacts you physically, often something you don't know or readily forget. Shame produces a chemical response in the brain. Shame alters the function of the endocrine system, alters the function of the nervous system. It alters the communication system, the network of communication between the portions of the brain. Therefore, in the function of the body, shame can impact you psychologically after your very own growth patterns, but as well as impacting you emotionally and physically. Shame not only impacts what you think and feel, it also impacts, for some of you, the way you think and the way you feel. The way you go about doing that of thinking and feeling. It's not just the thoughts or feelings that you have that come up. It's what you do with them, how you respond to them, how you react to them, that was also impacted by the very shame itself. That function of debility may be more crippling to you than, say, others. More crippling to you in certain other limitations in your reality that you may experience within that reality. Also, the accumulation of shame for many becomes internalized. Internalized is a lovely psychological term, but what it means is that you become the source. You see, some of you had shame from the preverbal shame into the childhood, into the adolescent years, and even beyond, but is accumulating like a snowball, getting larger and larger and larger. And it has to go somewhere, so you internalize both the offense and the offender. It's not that you forgot what happened to you, or you forgot who did in some psychological ploy of numbing yourself out. You even go beyond that, where you become the offender. You are the source of your shame, and you become the perpetuator of the offense. So when you start looking to your childhood, infancy, even the adolescent years, you can't seem to find what's there, because you are the offender and you are perpetuating the offense. It is very difficult, for example, for a person that is abusing or abandoned in a shame-producing way, shame-based way, to face, confront, or deal with their own shame when they are now acting it out and now passing it on when they are their own offender. There are a few of you here who have that. It may be why it's so perplexing and so complexing for you to deal with. Why is your shame personally and particularly so difficult to work with? Why? Comments below. What's important for you is to know, why is shame, the generic concept, so difficult to work with? In order to deal with this uniqueness of shame, basically, there are things that we must accomplish together. It's important for you is to know why shame, the class or group or generic concept, is more difficult to work with. One needs to look at, not remember a list of however many, but you know it is too painful for you. The person next to you may not be too painful for them, but for you it is. Or is it because of the debility, not only physical weakness, it is a mental, emotional, and physical, but not only what you think and feel, but the way you think and feel. Or perhaps for you, it has accumulated in whatever way you have become your own offender, who does something wrong or causes problems, having internalized a shame since there was nowhere else to put it. Or you did focus on one wave, either infant, child, teen, or adult shame, and succeeded beautifully, and ended up sabotaging with the other waves. You need to know what your reason is for why shame is so difficult. All of them. No, it's not one more than the other, yet there may be some we have not mentioned. We offer these as examples, but for those examples, a catalyst to understand why your shame is for you personally and particularly so difficult to work with. Beyond that, what is so unique at those adolescent years? Why are those years more than the preverbal shame, child shame, or adult-onset shame? Why are those years so distinct and unique? Comments below. Then we need to know what shame does during those years that is different than previous or subsequent times. You see, that is important to understand. It's not just shaming. Shame. No, it is different. Each wave is different. Shame occurs during these sets of years, and it happens in this unique way during those years. That is what makes shame so bloody difficult. But if you can understand that and unravel that, then can be an incredibly easy tool and easy to deal with. After those years, when you become an adult, you straightened out, became a worthwhile person again, and managed to fix up the mess you made to compensate for your defect or your flaw. That is the trauma and shame that comes with high school. The trauma of high school plus the trauma of growing up. The shame has been accumulating or begins. This time around, teenage years is so potent, so powerful, so traumatic, so wounding, so much pressure, and so much demands. The trauma of high school plus the trauma of growing up. The shame has been accumulating or begins. This time around, teenage years is so potent and so powerful and so traumatic and so wounding, so much pressure and so many demands. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you for being here. Any comments about teen shame? You can write them below. This is Chris Parr from Miraculate Healing, and thank you for being here.